There's the voice. We are now on Facebook. Wonderful. Okay, everybody, welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. Um, Today we're going to be talking about humor and authoritarians, and I've touched on it in different ways before, and I will explain why I'm touching on it today, which probably will be obvious given what I said in my prompt. But at any rate, before I say anything, I turn to my wonderful partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History. I'm delighted to be with you here every Friday. If this is your first time tuning in, please let us know in the chat so we can properly welcome you. But more importantly, I'm going to kind of just explain to you how things go. So Joanne's going to talk about today's topic for about 30 minutes. And then I will come back at that time and look for your questions about today's topic in the Q&A. The chat is great. Please engage in the chat as you wish, but if you have questions about today's topic, I really need you to put those in the Q&A so I can find them quickly. And then we'll have a little conversation afterwards.
Wonderful. Yay. Okay. So I will be totally honest with you as to what led to this topic today. And we can talk if we want in Q&A a little bit about the Musk-Trump phenomenon. I wasn't ready yet to talk about that because I have some reservations about what's going on there. But regardless, the reasons why I thought of this topic is my brother and my niece are in town, and we went out and had dinner at a Mexican restaurant yesterday, and I ate tacos. Not for any political reason, but they looked really good. So I had tacos. And then I thought, okay, it's this topic that I'm going to talk about today. I think twice before in different ways I've addressed it. And now we have a different way of talking about it. And that is just humor and politics. So I think um, during the campaign, the last presidential campaign, I talked a little bit about the power of humor, generally speaking, in politics. And it was because at the time, the Harris campaign was doing various things, not just laughing, but doing various things that were funny and had people laughing. And I was talking about how that can be a powerful political tool. And then at some other point last year, I talked about pushback politics. And one of the ways in which I talked about politicians pushing back was with humor. And in that case, I was talking about members of Congress who were using humor to smack back at Republicans who were, being kind of bullying, that these handful of individuals were using humor to push back. At any rate, so that's how I've addressed this before. But what I want to talk about today, slightly different use of humor, but an important one. And I have seen glimmerings of it online, various commentators talking about it. And there's scholarship on it, and it's actually like I'm not making up this topic. But like a known phenomenon, and the whole taco thing, which I'll come to in a moment, um, is in a sense, and we'll see, who knows what will happen, but it is in line with the kind of political weapon that often gets under the skin of authoritarian type people and can help to get others sort of engaged and help to not necessarily fuel a movement, but kind of get it going a little bit. But at any rate, let's talk briefly about taco. Now, for those of you who have missed this taco meme word, everything else, it was coined in the semi-recent past by Financial Times columnist Robert Armstrong, and he referred to what he called the taco trade. And what he meant was, and what taco stands for is Trump always chickens out, in that he put some ridiculously high, in this case, tariff And then at the first sign of pushback, it suddenly, no, I didn't mean that at all. Let's wait till July. And so this Financial Times columnist was talking about this phenomenon of like making a high tariff, bringing back a high tariff, and basically, as he put it, chickening out the sort of on again, off again tariff policies. Now, for obvious reasons, President Trump did not like this. Apparently, he was late in learning of it, supposedly. Again, I can only judge what I've read in the press, and so what the press says is he doesn't like it. It made him angry, and he was angry that he was caught off guard when someone um, threw it at him. A reporter actually said, "What do you think of this?" And he didn't know what it was. And then when he knew what it was, he got angry and said, I think this is on May 28th, you ask a nasty question like that. And he was upset. Trump always chickens out and made him angry. And he said, this is called negotiation. Okay. So at any rate, that's Trump always chickens out. That's the sort of new framing device that people are throwing out there. What's interesting about it, it has a certain stickiness to it, because it's like catchy, it's short, it is a little bit I don't want to say nasty, but it's got a little edge to it, and yet it's unquestionably humorous, right? And there are any number of ways that people are both tacos and chickens are appearing all over online, various social media platforms. So there are any number of ways in which people are spinning this. It's catching on. Again, we can't predict where it'll go, but some press commentators are saying that, kind of maybe is going to be as catchy as Let's Go Brandon, which of course, I mean, was turned around and wasn't so useful after a while. But at any rate, um, that's what we're looking at now is, and I'm going to come back to this idea, a different kind of framing of what's going on right now, and particularly given seemingly repressive measures, ways in which people are being, deported without due process. All of the ways in which there are a variety of things going on right now that feel as though they're grounded on threats, and threats of any number of different things, threats of punishment, revenge, retribution, all of the different things that we're seeing. Now it's time for me to punish people who punished me. In that environment, which is a repressive environment, and which, again, authoritarians, generally speaking, are I saw that chicken head go floating by. Authoritarians are generally people who rely on keeping people afraid, seeming that they're, all powerful, and sort of cowing people into compliance or silence. That's what dictators and authoritarians rely on, is the fear factor that people aren't going to want to step up. They're not going to want to say anything. If they do, they're afraid of the horrible things that will happen, like, oh, I don't know, people who maybe they're ICE, maybe they're not, but they're masked are going to come for you in the street. I mean, we can talk about any number of ways in which there is an environment of repression on the edge of the cusp, and that's why in this kind of a moment, humor can be really powerful. Hannah Arendt, the philosopher Hannah Arendt, of course, put this very succinctly. She said, to remain in authority requires respect for the person or the office. The greatest enemy of authority, therefore, is contempt. And the surest way to undermine authority is laughter, right? If you can laugh at the authoritarian, and I'm not saying, and I think in one of the other two episodes where I mentioned humor, I'm not saying, ha ha ha, ha, all of that, everything that's going on now, we should just be like giggling and happy. What I am saying is framing what's going on in a way that is acknowledging what's going on, but also mocking it in a certain way, pointing at it out for what it actually is, that can be really effective. Now, I'm going to come back to Serbia. I know I've mentioned Serbia before. That's a place where this actually became like a technique of resistance, explicitly a technique of resistance. But before I talk about that, the thing that came into my mind this morning as a kind of pseudo example of this, although I hadn't thought of it in this way before. Um, I was thinking of, believe it or not, the Sedition Act. And here's why I thought of it. So the Sedition Act, it's late 18th century, 1798, and it's under John Adams's presidency, and we're involved in the quasi-war with France, and the Federalists have sort of a two-prong response to it. On the one hand, they're thinking, oh, maybe we're going to be at war with France and we have to do things for security measures. And then they're also thinking, ooh, our opposition, the Jeffersonian Republicans, really like France. So this might be a really good way to swat at our opposition, silence their press. This will be great. So the Sedition Act was both it's in their mind, a sort of national security act and a political savaging kind of act. But the part that ties in with what we're talking about today is some of the reasoning that some of the Federalists used to justify the Sedition Act. In addition to saying, this is great, we can silence Republican editors. They said that too. But one of the things that they said is, and this was particularly true in the early years of the government, the only authority that this new government has is the authority, the power of the reputations of the people in office. And if we allow people to attack people in office, whether it's with humor or any other way, then this will chip away at the only authority of the government, of the new national government right now. So part of the logic of the Sedition Act is you can't smack at people with power without damaging the power structure. This was hyper true within the first, 10, 15 years of government, but still, same kind of logic, right? We don't want people sort of smacking away at high-ranking political figures who are Federalists. We have to shut them up. We have to stop them from doing this. It's not funny. Like, I think, and I didn't have time this morning to look it up, but I seem to remember that one person who was tried for sedition, or at least charged with sedition, um, said something about a cannonball hitting President John Adams in the ass. Like that was the level of like, ooh. But that he got in some trouble for saying something like that because it was ridiculing the president in some way. So the Sedition Act kind of falls into the same logic that we're talking about here, which is satire, mockery, laughter, humor. All of these things can undercut the sort of power and authority of figures in power. And once you chip away at that facade of authority, power, fear, all of the dominance, all of the things that authoritarian type figures rely on, once you get underneath that barrier, then you expose the weakness beneath, right? And generally speaking, the idea that bullies always are weak underneath, that they may sound big, they may talk big, they may act big, but basically bullies, it's not grounded on much. That it's mostly or often talk more than anything else. So in one way or another, this kind of framing and the taco thing, which is humorous, there are countless ways to use both tacos and chickens to, make it funny. President Trump, in a sense, did the wrong thing, which was noticing it and making it clear that it bothered him. So that now has given it additional life. Um, Let me talk for a minute about a specific example. I've mentioned it before, but whenever I think about the power of humor as a political weapon, I think about Serbia, because in Serbia, there was a youth group called Otpor. I'm probably saying it wrong. Otpor, Otpor, Otpor. And they were aggressively used humor to smack at Milosevic, the authoritarian leader, to smack at his authority. They had to do it because this was a very repressive government. They had to do it apparently sometimes in subtle ways. So, for example, There was some kind of a um, I guess his wife, Milotrovic's wife, wore like a white flower in her hair. And so this group went out on the street and they were giving out free candy. And the um, sort of figure that represented the candy on the label was a cow with a flower in her hair. And so it was very clear, that that's what they intended to be mocking was the wife. But what were they doing that was wrong? Right? Like they were giving out candy. They didn't say anything explicitly wrong. They didn't do anything explicitly wrong. They just giving out free candy. So, and the police would have looked silly if they began arresting young people for giving out free candy. So that's an example of a subtle way to jar people into recognizing that the fear that it feels as though it's looming isn't the norm, isn't the normal way to feel, and can be fractured, and that you can get underneath it, that you can think differently. That's part of the power of this kind of authoritarian thinking, is that you get people to assume that this is the way things are. In that sense, this is the norm now. This is how things operate. And now I have to adjust to whatever's going on now. It's the new normal. And humor is a powerful reminder that you don't have to think that way. It isn't necessarily the new normal, that there are other ways of understanding things, and that if you look at what's going on differently, you can recognize the abnormality of it. You can recognize the ways in which it isn't just, isn't normal, it is repressive, and something that, particularly in the realm of democracy, isn't particularly democratic. So basically, if you can laugh at authority, you can begin to break the hold of obedience and fear that tends to capture the populace of a country that is being governed at a particular moment by a dictatorial or authoritarian character. Um, and again, one important way in which this does this is just reminding people. And we've seen discussions of this, or certainly I've seen discussions of this all over online, in print, and everything else about, this isn't normal. I'm sure all of you out there, in one way or another, have seen people saying, you have to remember this isn't normal. This isn't normal. This thing happening isn't normal. It's not normal for a president to do this. It's not normal for, you could fill in many, many blanks as to many of the things right now that are not normal. And, sometimes having someone come forward and say, this isn't normal, let me remind you what normal is. But humor is a powerful way of doing that. It basically says, wait, you stop and look at this thing for a moment because this is a weird thing. It's actually a comical thing. And if you take that pause and you actually step back and think about what's happening and acknowledge even that there's something funny about it, it allows you to think differently about it. And I'm not going to go all psychological on you, but I think shaking things up and getting your psyche to remember and to accept the fact that this isn't normal, that's one of the ways in which I think humor can be particularly powerful in the kind of moment that we're swimming in right now. Um, so, and I've talked a lot about what I encourage people to do when they hear, read or hear language that feels as though it's intended to make you be scared or to intimidate you or to point out enemies. I always say, and have said for years at this point, um, always pause and think, who wants you to feel a certain way? Always think about the thing that's obviously intended to provoke a response. Think about why this person or this group has put that forward and why they might want you to feel a certain way. That's no less true with what I'm talking about here. But if you do pause and think about laughter or mockery or the whole taco thing, you can respond in any number of ways. But one way in which you might respond is along the lines of what I've just said, which is actually, it is kind of weird that he's like putting forward these tariffs and then taking the tariffs back, and what is he doing? And that's not normal. It shakes you up a little bit, and it enables you, doesn't force you to, but enables you to reframe what you're seeing, to reframe your understanding of what's going on, and to remind you that what you're seeing isn't normal. The degree to which it is possible to see things going on that are obviously abnormal and to, on a sort of instinctual, visceral level, not really grasp or have a hand on or own the ways in which it's abnormal. I mean, even speaking as a historian who's thinking analytically and looking for historical patterns and all of the ways in which I'm not just sitting here swimming in, in the world. I'm actually trying to interrogate it and analyze it. And I understand all the ways in which some of the things happening right now are not normal. But if you're not thinking hard, and as most of us are doing, you're sort of living your life, right? And doing what you need to do, which we all need to do. And then there are like five things in the news that are all upsetting. And right now, which is why I didn't want to talk about Musk and Trump yet. I'm waiting for the underlying dynamic of that to come forward. Because, and I'm not saying that this is meant to be a distraction. If it were, it's very, very useful in that way, right? If it's partly being played up because it gets people to not focus on a lot of other things that this administration is doing, boy, it's doing that really well. And so, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but I am saying that's why, anything that causes you to pause and question the normalcy of something in a repressive or potentially repressive environment, really strategic, really useful framing, and frees your mind up at least a little bit to remind yourself about what really is normal. We, as I said before, as a historian, even I forget sometimes, right? There'll be some point in the day where I'll stop and I'll be like, wait, what? Like, I didn't think about this thing. This thing has been happening for 2 days. How did I not think about this thing? This is a crazy thing, right? It's easy to do that. And that's some of the power that humor has. It points it out and then it sticks with you. Like taco is a little sticky, it stays with you because it's funny and it makes you laugh. And so it has a long life potentially, depending on how people respond to it. So, laughter, humor in a repressive environment, as Hannah Arendt said, it sometimes invites clumsy reactions from opponents because how do you confront humor? Like, do you arrest people in Serbia for giving out candy? It makes it hard for a regime to figure out the best way to respond. Because of that, it has this is going to be a goofy way to phrase it, but it has kind of a cool factor to it, meaning now you're in the in group making the joke. And that's a way to, again, encourage people to sort of go along with your framing of it, your humorous framing of it, more than anything else, by getting people to think about the people in power, the people with authority, by helping to get them past a sense of pure acceptance, excuse me, or fear, which is the ultimate basis of authoritarian movements, by allowing you to take a breath and see beyond the fear and to laugh. That becomes a tactical, strategic, and potentially really powerful political weapon in ways that I realize as I'm talking to you here can be hard to fathom, because to say like laughter is a powerful weapon feels like a ridiculous statement. But if you think about authoritarians and dominance and fear is what they run on, anything that chips away at dominance and fear can have a major impact on a wannabe dictator, because there's not a lot beneath the fear and the dominance. They're there, strong men are there. They use force to get power, generally speaking, and then they use fear and repression and potentially violence to keep that power. They're not there because of wide popular support. They know that too. So if enough of the public can turn on them and expose the fact that they're claiming a lot of power, a lot of dominance, but actually, they don't really have it. All of these things, all of this sort of reframing of the moment, I've talked about in any number of ways, countless numbers of ways in which that's important. But I think particularly right now, and that's why the taco phenomenon felt worth talking about today. Great example of it. It's sticking. People are making fun of it, and by making fun of it, it's making the president look a little ridiculous. The president is bothered by it and acknowledged that he was bothered by it, and that's not smart either because now the people who were using it are going to be more encouraged to use it. But at any rate, um, breaking the fear, building confidence, changing your way of thinking, enabling you to realize the ways in which some of what you're seeing isn't normal. All of that is really important as a tool of resistance. Again, I realize there's a slight, you're going to laugh at the idea that laughter and humor can be a tool of resistance. But I think for all of the ways in which I just explained it, it can have a real power. I didn't have time this morning. I was going to look for examples of humor being used to attack King George in the Revolutionary era, right? Maybe in humorous essays or in political cartoons, that would have the same impact, right? Well, it's the king, ha ha. Or the cartoon that I've talked about it at least once before during Washington's presidency, when they were selling cartoons on the street, I believe, and the cartoon was Washington walking up the steps of a guillotine uh, to have his head chopped off. I don't even remember what the caption was. All of these cartoons in this period are full of words in a way that doesn't strike a modern audience being humorous. But at any rate, it was poking fun at Washington. Washington is not a guy who enjoyed being poked fun at. And although he wasn't just the guy ruling based on dominance, he was very careful about following constitutional strictures. That made him bonkers. He erupted. He had a huge fit about that because it was making him look ridiculous. It was swatting at his character, at his personality. So I'll stop here, but I'll just say, as ever, um, think about some of what you're seeing, how the conversation of politics is going right now. Think about what people who are resisting or people who are opposed to this administration, the tools that they're using to oppose the administration, which ones seem to catch on, which ones seem to have power, and how those with power are responding. Because what you're looking at there is not just the reframing of a moment, but it's the dynamics of power being fleshed out. And they're not going to be static, but it's a really useful and I think important way to look at the ongoing fire hose of bad that we're living amidst to see what's happening, who feels as though they're on the offense, who feels as though they're on the defense, and what that suggests about the dynamics of power. Okay. I extra 3 minutes. Mug is late, late, late. I know, 3 minutes late for the mug. Okay, so those of you who are here for the first time, every week I have a mug that relates in some way to the topic under discussion. This morning, I awed and inspired my brother by showing him my amazing mug cabinet. And so this morning I do not have a taco mug. I do not. But this is definitely using humor to mock something that feels threatening. And I will explain the background of it. Pomp and crust for the door.
Okay, Carolee threatened me within an inch of my life if I didn't get a good mug shot. Okay, I
Oh,
think I
okay.
because she's on a field trip today.
Oh, okay. I will offer various views.
Yep, we
Okay.
got it. We got it.
Okay.
That's
So
one of my favorite mugs because it's matte.
right. So Matt was my partner in crime before Annie was my partner in crime. And I did an episode on how petrified men were in the early years of the new government at women having some power. Because during the revolution, women gained a sense of their power and their usefulness and their importance in politics. And so there are all of these satirical newspaper essays making fun of the fact that, women having political power. Ha, 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 ha. And this particular essay was Roxana Wilhelmina Pompencrest was the name they gave to her. And she was campaigning to be the doorkeeper of Congress. And her campaign was like, I have very tall hair. I have a lot of hair, and I build it up, So if you think I might be short, but no, my hair is. So it was just ridiculing the idea of women having power. So this actually is kind of on target as far as a mug is concerned. I was very proud of myself. And I don't get to use it all that often. And I do love it. It was like an early mug that was made explicitly based on what we say here in History Matters. Okay, now I'm gonna open.
All right. Well, the chat has been on fire as usual, but we've got lots of great questions to get to. Um, so I'm going to start off with our good friend Troy. He says, given my connection to today's topic, oh, he's letting us know that he can only chat when he's on the road. That's not a question, but thank you for letting us know. He can't chat. Okay, Ellen says, nope, she says after party. You guys need to like triage these. Sydney. Okay, I know I can count on Sydney. Sydney is our undergrad friend that comes faithfully every week. Sydney asks, why is humor so effective in times of political turmoil? How does it take the sting off chaotic politics?
If you think about, let's see, let's create a moment uh that's scary. Let's say, well, just generally imagine some ruler out there in the world that is threatening and is ready to put sign an executive order and put something really repressive seemingly into play. The logical response to that is, oh no, right? Like this is horrible, it's bad, never mind the fact that executive orders aren't law, but put that to one side. The logical reaction to that would be like fear and being upset. If someone can make fun of that, if you think about what your response might be, you still might not like it. You still might be scared of it, but that will be really reminding you of the degree to which this isn't normal at all. And as a matter of fact, if the humor is good, there's something ridiculous about this. Like, this is just like sad. And again, it's not necessarily going to stop it. But if you get to the point where you're not just responding emotionally and saying bad, and you're actually able to say, wait a minute, this is ridiculous, this isn't normal. Generally speaking, you're going to feel less sort of visceral panic. And you'll be, again, that will give you the chance to take a breath and take a step back. So I think that's part of what we're talking about here. Is it's shaking the hold of things that feel scary or threatening and giving you the room in your brain to say, wait, this may be threatening and scary, but it's also really not normal. And there's something ridiculous about the idea that people are suggesting it is normal. That's important if you think about it. It's a really important place to get in a moment that feels repressive.
Yeah, I think when you were just now saying that, it made me think of, and I can't believe this is going to come out of my mouth, but after 9/11, everything every night was so scary for weeks. And I remember the first time that Saturday Night Live resumed putting shows on, and they had Mayor Giuliani. And at the time, like he was America's favorite mayor, right? He got us through this tough time, and he came out and I remember they had the whole cast on the stage and Lauren Michaels, and Lauren Michaels was like, "Is it okay to laugh?" And Giuliani was like, "Yes." And it was almost like the floodgate kind of broke, like we can somewhat go back to normal after this horrible thing. And I just remember
It's back, right? You're like, oh
like a
yeah,
release.
yeah, exactly. That's important too,
Yeah.
that it's a release. Absolutely. I it's just sitting here and now I can't remember um the specifics of it, but I feel like at some point um there was someone in someone's bathroom, like in an American bathroom of an elite person was hung a portrait of King George, or in a British bathroom somewhere was hung a portrait of George Washington. I can't remember who was making fun of who, but obviously there's another case in which you're making an obvious point, but it's just a portrait hanging on the wall. The disrespect of that, everyone would get that, and probably if you use that bathroom, you would be either scandalized or amused, but one way or another, you would get the point. Similar idea.
Now I'm trying to figure
Oh,
out
there you
whose
go.
portrait I want to hang in my bathroom.
Thought, that's a story from the movie. Well, okay, now there's two. We got Ethan Allen, and then we got the movie Lincoln. Um,
Uh,
so I don't know. I did not look it up. It just popped into my head, but apparently, and I won't sort through, but Lincoln tells the Ethan Allen story is what people appear to be saying. Yes. Okay. So that's a perfect example of this idea.
okay, our good buddy Dave asks, is humor that is pointed at he calls it a sociopathic narcissist, his words, not mine, who has unchecked power, smart, given how volatile the reactions are likely to be. So he's wondering if the humor with this particular current situation we're in could could maybe make it worse, I think is what the point of that question
Well,
was.
so speaking generally, about any kind of leader who is threatening and repressive, it is totally possible that that can infuriate that person to the point that they're going to respond powerfully. Totally possible. It is also possible that that kind of response is might be scary, but it's going to add to the idea that this person is a kook. Like this person is not good at their job, is behaving in a ridiculous manner. And what we said bothered them so much that now they've done this thing. So it's totally true, which is why, like the Serbian youth movement that was like, have some candy with a cow with a flower in its ear. And you'll all know we're talking about the dictator's wife, but we're not saying anything. And if the Milosevic got like outraged at that, it's first of all, he's acknowledging the joke, right, at his wife's expense. So you're totally right. It can go the wrong way. And so you have to be careful and you have to be strategic. But still, um, the power of it is, I think, undeniable. It's just it's a strategic weapon, a strategic tool. It's also the song Yankee Doodle,
Mm.
right? Yankee Doodle was in that case was meant to make fun of Americans with British song. Um, Yankee, right? Yankee Doodle stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Okay, so a macaroni at that time was a fop. It was a sort of silly, over fashionable, foppish character. So what Yankee Doodle is really saying is, these crude outbackers here, you know, stick a feather in their hat and they're like, oh, look at me. I am a macaroni. I am in high style. It was making fun of Americans. And in that case, Americans had the smart response by saying, okay, you know what? Yes, we're Yankee Doodle. That's who we are. We're these outbackers, and they took it and they owned it, and that totally took the sting away. So this is another way in which humor is powerful, and but you have to use it intelligently, and it opens new ways of thinking, but that can go in directions both good and bad.
All right. Our friend Peggy, who's with us very often, asks, when FDR was pushing his programs during the Great Depression, were people saying it wasn't normal?
That I don't know. I would assume, but this is a historian assuming things, and so that's not normally what a historian does. But I would assume that people who really, really hated, well, certainly like packing the Supreme Court, there were certainly things, generally speaking, that FDR was talking about or doing that people responded by saying, this isn't normal. I don't like this. I don't know the degree to which people made fun of him. And that I don't know, related to what we're talking about today. But yeah, for sure, people pointed and make claims about him like using his power to too great a degree and making accusations of him. What would be interesting would be the Library of Congress Prints and Photographs Division. You can go online to it, and there's a huge database of cartoons and photographs and prints and artwork. You could go there and probably search on FDR and humor or cartoon, and you would learn very quickly what people were doing or how people were using humor to smack at what he was doing. So that there's a case in which historians assuming things, another good band aid. I think that's true. But that would be again a good like essay assignment for a student would be use a database like that that's full of images and see what they suggest about the ways in which people were thinking about and liking or disliking what FDR was doing or any controversial or powerful character. Exactly. And as Lenora says, when Biden latched onto the let's go Brandon thing, and then suddenly it was like, whoops, well,
Yep.
that's not effective anymore. Yeah, that um generally speaking, it's totally important to know that you have to be strategic in using it. And one of the it might infuriate the person who's the target, and it might backfire when people are like, yeah, you know what? That's really funny. We love it. Thanks so much for offering this, that witty way of thinking about ourselves. So
I mean,
yeah.
I think about that's kind of the way that kids that are getting bullied will sometimes turn whatever the bully's saying around and make fun of themselves to diffuse it. Kathy says, I'm not sure if it's really a question, but she talks about how she saw that the DNC had brought taco trucks and surrounded the White House last week. She says some pundits thought it was spot on, but others thought it was dopey. Is it a good way to poke fun at the president?
So that's a really good example because at some point I did read, I think in front of the RNC headquarters, there was a taco truck. And so some people responded by laughing, and some Republicans responded by saying something like, this is if this is what the Democrats have in the realm of resistance, they're pretty sad. And some people responded to that. So on the one hand, um, and this is again a great example of how it's not as though there's a fail-safe like make a joke and life is good. But in this case, I would say the taco trucks probably did a little of both, right? So some people thought that was really funny. And, a taco truck on every corner. Like we've had tacos in political discourse way more than I think is normal. So just using the idea of a taco links to all of that as well. But the idea of saying, essentially, and when you're a Republican, really? Like, is that all you got? That had some sting to it as well. But regardless of like which side wins, suddenly people are stepping back and looking at the battle and not focusing on the power. And again, that's important if you're talking about getting people to feel riled up and activated to resist. Even if which side wins, even if there's more power with the sort of is that all you got Democrats kind of mode, if you get people thinking about the combat and not just the intimidation, that has a power and importance too. But that's a great example. And I also wanted to, Annie, you made a point about Americans taking an insult and monetizing it. And that's a really good point, which is that generally speaking, because there's going to be taco merchandise, I'm sure. There already
There
is.
already is.
T-shirts, keychains, I don't know what.
Yep.
And in some cases, that's partly like this is funny. And right now at this particular moment, we really want ways, some business saying this is great. Like people are going to love this, going to enable them to laugh. It's going to make a point politically, but it's kind of silly, so it's not really a threat. And on the other hand, it's, well, this is a quick way to make money. Excellent. So we'll just take advantage of this. So yeah, I haven't looked for taco merchandise, but I'm sure. I now I can imagine it's going to appear in the chat. But yeah, monetizing it, not necessarily for, and some people might monetize it for politically strategic reasons, and some people just, thank you, capitalism. It's something they can make money on.
Yeah. Um, they were talking about having taco trucks across the street from this parade that they're planning on the president's birthday.
Well, now that's going to be, actually, that's a good point. Okay. So, and that might be what I talk about next week, actually. Um, the parade. I have very strong feelings about that. Because that's totally about fear and image and dominance and spectacle. So that would be a smart moment for people who are opposed to that to find ways of making it look silly in some way. I don't know the way to do that. But that's going to be all about spectacle, one way or another. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That's really, really, really anti-democratic, threatening, authoritarian. That happens, dictators do that to show, like, look how strong I am. I'm really strong, and I got the military behind me. Like, if you go all the way back in time, go to the founding of the nation, you know, something that was a given in people's thinking at the time was repressive governments or powerful governments use the military to stay in power and to raise taxes to support the military, so you pay higher taxes as well. That there's a whole, a standing army is a tool of repression. It was a given to people at the time. So what we're, going to see is a perfect example of the sort of thing that people in the founding era would have said, okay, we're getting that message. We're totally tool of repression. Thank you. That's very much what you're showing us now. And the degree to which people will see that, and hopefully, maybe I'll find a way to do that publicly. Any historian of early America, um, it's like you don't have to dig very deep to find the fear of standing army, um, language, really, really loud, angry language. So yeah. Um,
So a
I,
lot of people mentioned the smoke that wrote the word taco over the White House. Some people weren't sure if that was real or if it was a meme. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know that. I don't know that.
I don't either.
That's important. Well, that's an important question because you also need to ask that. It might still be funny and you might still laugh at it, but you actually really want to know. Like one of the things that I saw being um, sort of, proven false, and I saw it circulating around yesterday, and then this morning I was like, I just better check to make sure this isn't true. There was this. I guess someone used a Fox News Chiron and had Pam Bondi, and it said something about how the administration was going to prosecute people who like sent taco mockery to the president or some ridiculous or Taco Bell discount coupons or something to the president. And it floated around enough that people were like beginning to say, like, is that true? Is that truth? And like Snopes, among other websites, was like, yeah, no, like it's a joke. But, there's a case in which, actually, it's an interesting case. There's a case in which, given the weirdness of the times in which we live, some part of you would be ready to believe that, right? And some people did. It's like, really, is that true? Because this administration seemingly does ridiculous things about trying to protect itself and shut people up and stamp out people who are resisting and people who are expressing resistance. Maybe they're really doing that. They're not, but that suggestion, again, and that was whoever put it out there. Yeah, as Laura said, Snopes says it's false. That didn't happen.
It was Mar-a-Lago, not the White House. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay. Um, at any rate, putting it out there about, you know, taking legal action against people, making that joke and sending it to the president. There's a great example of a joke that if you took it seriously and then decided or realized it's not serious, if you took it seriously, then you're like this is really not normal. If you realize it's a joke, still you're going to be like, that's not ridiculous given this climate, and that tells you something about this administration. So that's a great example also of again, humor's complicated, but it even if it doesn't work, it can have a kind of power. I'm trying to catch up with some of what, as ever, the chat is like whizzing by. Um,
Okay, so Ellen asked, has the current president ever gone to the White House Correspondents' Dinner for either term? Or are there any other presidents who refused to go to an event where they knew that they would likely be poked fun at?
well, that's a good example because generally speaking, presidents would go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner explicitly because they were showing that they're good sports and they were going to be roasted. They were going to be made fun of. So there that, and I can't say did every president do that as long as those dinners have been happening. I don't know that. But there's a case in which, whoever's president at the time, most of them certainly understand that, it's important for them to be willing to be poked fun at. Now, isn't there a case in which, um, was it under Obama that Trump was poked fun at a correspondence dinner and he did,
People say that's what made him run.
which I don't know, but that's a great example of um, being willing. Well, that's actually the reverse of what we're talking about here, isn't it? If you're not repressive and if you're willing to see that you yourself might be goofy, and you are willing to have people make fun of you and laugh at it, like, yeah, 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 that is a way, not this is not necessarily the reason people do it, but it certainly shows that you're not trying to act like a dominant, angry, fear-inducing leader. It's you're willing to step down off the pedestal and have people make jokes and laugh along with it. So that's kind of a more democratic display than the alternative.
Yeah. So Dave, our good buddy Dave, says, is humor, and he's using taco as the example, laughing at authority, is humor different than biting satire, which he thinks when it's well done is, deeper. Is that more effective than slapstick humor? Is there a difference giving a narcissist to whom the humor is the name calling? Um,
Good point. That's a really good point because satire, sarcasm and satire, that's really powerful because that's grounded in a sense on intelligence, right? They're grounded on a deep understanding of what's going on in some way. That's why, the late 18th century, the age of satire and sarcasm, John Quincy Adams called, I think, sarcasm, like I'm not going to do justice to his language. He was like, it's the most powerful weapon of all, like sarcasm. If you can sort of smack at someone with a little sarcastic comment, the wound is deep. You kind of can't get past that kind of thing. So that's a different kind of humor, and I do think it's potentially doesn't uh, might appeal to a different kind of audience, might have a different kind of power, but it's the same idea. And satire is a way in which you can totally make a situation, I'm talking about Martians in a repressive Martian land and make it very clear who you're talking about and use satire to make fun of these people and it's very clear what you're doing. Um, so yeah, satire. And then slapstick. Slapstick, again, different kind of humor, different kind of response. I'm sure that there are examples. Well, there's anti-Hitler slapsticky stuff, isn't there? Wasn't there during
There's a whole movie, a Wes Anderson film, I think, about a little kid and he had an imaginary friend and it was Hitler.
yeah. Um, and right, Jacqueline, sometimes it's hard to distinguish the news from the Onion. That there came a point at which suddenly I realized that Onion headlines, and for those who don't know, right, that's right, Charlie Chaplin, great example, Mel Brooks, great example. That the Onion is a humor publication, and sometimes so suddenly it was becoming hard to tell, like, oh, that's the Onion, and if you're questioning that, that's a like, wait a minute, I thought that was true. What does that mean? But it's true. People are mentioning Mel Brooks, who explicitly said that his way of dealing with Nazis is to laugh at them. That's the most powerful weapon, is to laugh at these Nazis. So endlessly, he was making fun of, Nazi springtime for Hitler in
Right.
the movies, right? That was his technique, and he was explicitly doing this. And Charlie Chaplin, absolutely making fun of power, making fun of capitalism, making fun of any number of things. Again, in his case, he was a clown, but he clearly had a powerful and in some cases political message to what he was doing. So those are great examples as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, Hogan's Heroes is a good one too.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Yeah,
about.
I heard about that. Okay, I'm going to let Miranda have the last word.
Okay.
Miranda has an interesting question. She says, Does the taco moniker also have staying power as a dig at the president because it brings up the whole Mexican immigration, his whole thing about vilifying? So she's curious about, will this taco thing stick throughout the term because it also has that other connotation attached?
It totally could. And it could stick or it could have added power because of the whole sort of immigration deportation thing. It could get added power if something happens with Mexico. There are any number of ways in which it can be reinforced and made even more powerful for sure. But you're right. And the fact that, there's some picture of him like eating what, a tostada or some ridiculous thing from his first term, right? So at any rate, yeah, no, it can take on all kinds of added meaning. And given the sort of anti-immigrant, America first and only kind of mode of this administration, yeah. And again, depending on how people use it, they can use it. It's not funny at all. Sort of, deportation things that are happening right now and denying people asylum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not funny at all. But finding a way to point that out, to highlight that, and to show like this is really not normal. It's typical of him to do this because blah, 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 blah. And look at how ultimately ridiculous and wrong it is. So it's a and I like the questions because it's important to note that you have to be smart and strategic to do this in a way that is will allow it to have the most possibility of actually being effective. And things can potentially go wrong, but uh, again, it's important. Um, okay. Um,
And some poof.
People are asking for the poof.
Chat.
Okay, so let me explain what will happen next. So we are now going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording, so we can be freer and easier with whatever the heck we want to talk about. If you beamed in through the NCHE website, just stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us through Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party as well. Thank you as ever for coming on a Friday morning to engage in the conversation of democracy, asking questions, questioning what's going on around us, uh, thinking about the meaning of things, the threat of things, the power of things, and being able to discuss that as a group and ask each other questions and sort of figure things out as a group. That's there's a power to that, just like there's a power to humor. I want to thank my partner in crime, Annie. I want to thank Carol/Claire. I want to thank the NCHE and Jessica for their role in allowing this to happen and sponsoring this. And again, thank you guys for being here for this. I love the fact that Linda's like, poof is my favorite part. Well, people ask mug and poof. It's very apparent when it's the
Yep.
mug moment and the poof moment. At any rate, everybody, have a good, safe week. I bet I'm going to be talking about that military parade. Uh, and I'm going to be beaming in on Friday from the West Coast. So for those of you who are grouchy because you have to be doing this at 7 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock, I will be with you.
Yep.
I will be in Seattle, beaming in at an early, oh no, Friday, I will be in Oakland, California,
Uh,
beaming in at a very early hour. I'll really need coffee. So at any rate, that's right. We don't have a poof mug. Okay, let us make our way to the after party, and I will see you all in one way or another next week.